than other folks do. But no matter how hard we try, we do live in a world that has come to see things in a distorted way. And so that's our context too. Even though we have a different way of looking at things, we still live in that same world. We need to encourage one another to rethink things a bit, to trust God more, and to take a close and honest look at what our values are and how closely our habits adhere to our values. Today's reading from Hebrews reminds us of the importance of our presence in each other's lives. Verse 23 reminds us that God is faithful. Now, it's always good to hear, isn't it, to be reminded. We know that, that's our experience, but just to say it out loud, God is faithful is a good thing to do. And then verse 24 says this, "Let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds." I love that verse because it uses the verb provoke differently than at least the way it was used when I was growing up. When I was growing up, my brother and I got in trouble for, as my mother put it, provoking one another. Anybody ever get in trouble for that? We got in trouble for provoking one another. It was her way of talking about picking a fight. Nobody else ever did that except me and my brother, right? That's what I thought. Okay. Or drawing the other one into some kind of bad behavior, which we did, or at least attempted to do with some frequency in our home. In Hebrews, we learn that you can provoke good behavior also. Well, my mother talked about it was about provoking bad behavior, but Hebrews says you can provoke good behavior also, so I really like that. We can goad and encourage one another into kindness and service and generosity instead of like just getting in trouble, which was what my experience was. Dick's first wife, Diane, dealt with the disease lupus for several years and finally died as a result of its complications. For several years after her death, Dick and Diane's adult children put on a fundraiser for lupus research. The fundraiser was held in the fall each year around Halloween. There was food, and there was music, and there was dancing, and a costume contest, but there was also a silent auction set up around the room where the fundraiser was held. People made contributions of goods and services, and others bid on them. It was always fun to run up the bids when you knew someone wanted something. Anybody ever done that before? You kind of know somebody wants it, and you run up the bid so they pay a little bit more for it? Well, one year there was a plastic pumpkin on the table. Dick and I were told that we were supposed to bid on that because it had been put together and donated by Dick's oldest granddaughter. She was just a little thing. Now she's in her first year in college this year. We did bid. We were supposed to, and so we did. But then a woman named Nancy, who had been a youth group member when Dick was the youth leader in his home church, now grown, heard that we were bidding on that, and she thought it would be fun to bid it up a little bit. So she took that as her mission for the evening, and every time we bid, she would bid a little bit higher. Before all was said and done, we paid over $50 for a small plastic pumpkin containing a little bit of candy and a small scarecrow flashlight. I think we still have it, but there it is. The following year, Dick's youngest daughter put together a dog kit. It was a basket of stuff with the theme of big yellow dogs. For anybody who's seen our dogs, you understand why big yellow dogs. We have a golden retriever and a yellow lab. It was obvious that the basket had been made with us in mind. There were gourmet dog biscuits, a good-looking leash, a pocket photo album with a picture of a beautiful yellow lab on the cover, and numerous other goodies in the basket. We dutifully bid on them, on that basket, like we were supposed to, for a while, but after a time we came to realize that it was tough competition. There was a woman that we didn't know there who really seemed to want that basket. She must have had our dogs in duplicate, I don't know. We kept the pace for quite a while and finally conceded that the goal was to raise money for lupus research and not to bankrupt us. And when the bidding went above $175, we dropped out, and the other woman got the basket of goodies, dog goodies. We were, in that instance, provoking one another, I believe, to good deeds, making baskets to appeal to a certain audience, us, and running up the bids, provoked us all to be more generous for that good cause. Today is about generosity. You heard that the short bits of scripture a few minutes ago that Maddie read for us from 1 Timothy. As for those of you who are rich, command them not to be haughty, or to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but rather on God, who richly provides for us with everything for our enjoyment. And then from Proverbs, some give freely, yet grow all the richer. Others withhold what is due and only suffer want. A generous person will be enriched, and one who gives water will get water. When I meet with a family to plan a funeral service or a memorial service for a loved one, I always ask them to tell me about the deceased person. This is especially important in cases when I'm conducting a service for someone that I didn't have the privilege to know, and that happens sometimes. I learn a lot about people when I ask questions like, what made her special? Or what do you want to make sure gets shared? What do you want to make sure is said before we close the service? Or what were the distinctive aspects of his character? Because of the sharing of loved ones, I often come away being sad that I didn't have the privilege to know that person, the joy of knowing that person, because families and loved ones share in such a way that I really feel like I've missed something because someone was so special. My brother is a teacher. He's a college professor, and he's comfortable speaking in public, and I have some experience myself in planning memorial services. So when our parents died, Dad in '96 and Mom in 2000, Lee and I, with a little help from clergy and musician friends of mine for backup, decided that we would conduct the services ourselves. We did the same for my maternal grandmother in Florida in 2003. We wanted to make sure that people who knew and loved them planned the services and shared about them, so we did it. It was a final gift of sorts. In each case, we shared important things, central to their characters. At my mom's service, I remember that I shared that she was the most generous person that I knew. To prove this, I gave an example. I bragged that my mom had been audited by the IRS 3 times in the last few years of her working life. My parents were divorced. My mom held a clerical-style job with the government. It wasn't a very high-level job. She didn't make a very large salary. And on each of 3 different occasions, the IRS auditor said something like this: Mrs. Annis, I think this is just a simple mistake. I think you've made a simple error in reporting your charitable contributions. Based on your income, this figure is too high. If we can just correct the figure and recalculate the tax, we'll be all set. My mom responded 3 different times, but the figure is correct. I have the statements from my church and other charities and the canceled checks. I didn't claim any cash contributions that I can't document. She told 3 different auditors 3 different times that she was a tither to her church, and that there were lots of other good causes and ministries that she also supported in addition to that. She couldn't understand what was so remarkable about it and why they were so surprised. She told them, that's what Christians do. They give. I'm not doing anything abnormal. There'd be lots of people in my congregation that would have the same kind of situation, I'm sure. She said, I have a place to live. I have food to eat. I have enough extra to go out with friends from time to time. I love giving gifts, and I'm able to do that. She understood herself to be richly blessed. I'm really proud to be the daughter of this generous woman. One day, someone will talk about all of us at a service like that. I have no illusion, by the way, that anyone will say of me, as I did of my mom, she's the most generous person I know. I don't have an illusion of that kind. I was raised by that person, and I hope I learned a little bit from her. But maybe someday someone will say that I'm a fraction as generous as my mom was, and that would be pretty good if that was true. My mom understood Winston Churchill's famous words, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. God created us to be generous. Created us with the willingness to give to God and to give to others. It's part of our nature. It's hardwired within us. It's actually a need that we have. There are, however, 2 voices that come up against our God-given impulse toward generosity. One, of course, is fear. Isn't fear always a troublemaker? One is fear. The fear that there may not be enough for me. If I give too much, there may not be enough left for me. It's not an unreasonable fear in these days. In these challenging times, many people worry legitimately about just getting by. Let me share my own experience. I don't know what it's like for you. My experience is that when I pay God first, when I write the checks for tithes and offerings first, there is always enough. When I don't, there isn't. It's just that simple. I don't pretend to understand it's the same number of dollars, so it really doesn't make any sense, but it's happened too many times to ignore. The difference seems to be my attitude and my priorities, not the size of the bills. Like I said, I don't get it completely, but it's my experience on many occasions over many years. Adam Hamilton tells a story about a wealthy man in Texas who gave millions of dollars to establish a university. Several years later, he lost his fortune. He lost nearly everything he had, and someone asked him at that time if he regretted giving all that money to the university. Here's what he said. Regret it? Look, that school is the only lasting thing I've done with my money. Had I not given for the school, I would have lost that money too, and then there would be nothing left to show for it. He understood, at least on some level, that we're created to give and not to hoard. The first voice is about need. We need to make sure we keep enough to take care of ourselves. And the second voice is about wants. If you give, you won't have enough money left to buy the stuff that you need to make you happy. We've talked about this in previous weeks, especially last week. Happiness is not for sale, and it cannot be bought at the mall, not even on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. None of you are going shopping, are you? Didn't think so. Okay, just checking.